I never thought I'd be the guy telling a story like this. You know, the kind of story where you think, this has to be fake. Things like this only happen in movies. But here I am, piecing together the fragments of my life after discovering a betrayal so deep, it still doesn't feel real. My wife, Lisa, cheated on me with her boss. But it's not just the infidelity that broke me. It's the aftermath, the revenge, and the bizarre twist of fate that I never saw coming. If you stick with me, you'll see why even now, I can hardly believe this all happened. I met Lisa during my senior year of college, and from the moment we started talking, I was hooked. She had this energy, this effortless charm that could light up a room. I wasn't the most confident guy back then. I was the quiet type, more comfortable tinkering with my coding projects than navigating the social scene. Lisa was everything I wasn't. She was bold, driven, and seemed to thrive on attention. I couldn't believe it when she chose me. We met at a mutual friend's party, and somehow, in the middle of her bouncing between conversations and making people laugh, she found me. I remember thinking, why is she even talking to me? But she stayed, asking me questions, laughing at my awkward jokes, and making me feel like I was the only person in the room. After that night, we were inseparable. Lisa was the kind of person who made everything feel like an adventure. She pushed me out of my comfort zone, encouraging me to take risks, to dream bigger. When I graduated and got my first job in software development, she was my biggest cheerleader. She was already working at a marketing firm by then, hustling her way up the ladder, and I admired her drive. We got married a year later. It was a small ceremony, nothing extravagant. Lisa said she didn't care about the frills, just about starting our life together. At the time, I thought that said everything about who she was, someone focused on the bigger picture, on building something real. For years, it felt like we were doing just that. We moved into a modest home in the suburbs, spent weekends talking about our dreams, and supported each other through every milestone. She landed a promotion that made her one of the youngest managers at her firm. I launched a side project that eventually turned into a successful software tool. I'll admit we were busy. Lisa's work demanded a lot of her. Long hours, networking events, the occasional business trip. My job was more stable, but I spent plenty of late nights glued to my computer, tweaking code or chasing a new idea. We joke about being passing ships, but it didn't feel like a problem, at least not then. Looking back, I can see the cracks were there, subtle but undeniable. There were moments I brushed off, thinking, everyone goes through this. Like the time I planned a weekend getaway to celebrate our anniversary, but Lisa canceled last minute because a major client needed her attention, or the way her phone always seemed to buzz late at night, and she'd glance at it, smile and say, just work stuff. I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? Lisa was my wife, my partner, the person I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. She'd been there for me through everything. So when she said she was working late, I believed her. When she started coming home later and later, I told myself it was just the price of her ambition. It wasn't until much later that I realized how blind I'd been. The shift was subtle at first, so small that I barely noticed it. Lisa had always been busy, but lately, her late nights started happening more often. First, it was just once a week, then twice. Before long, it felt like every other night. She was texting me, "Don't wait up. The campaign is killing me. I'll be home late." I wanted to be supportive. Her job was demanding, and she took it seriously. She'd talk about her boss, Ryan, all the time. "Ryan's brilliant, but he's a perfectionist," she'd say. Or, "Ryan's pushing us to land this massive client. It's a game changer for the company." I thought nothing of it. But then, there were the little things. She'd come home exhausted but buzzing with energy. She'd kick off her heels, pour a glass of wine, and scroll through her phone, smiling at something she wouldn't share. When I'd ask how her day went, she'd give me vague answers. It was fine or just the usual. She used to tell me everything down to the petty office drama, but now it felt like I was getting the highlights reel. The first time I felt real unease was during a work gala she invited me to. It was one of those black tie events with free champagne and awkward small talk. Lisa looked incredible in a sleek black dress, her hair pulled into an elegant twist. I was proud to be on her arm. When we arrived, she immediately started mingling, introducing me to colleagues and clients. That's when I met Ryan. He was tall, polished, and had this overconfident air that instantly rubbed me the wrong way. Lisa seemed different around him. She laughed louder at his jokes, leaned in closer when he spoke. It wasn't overt, but something about their dynamic made my stomach twist. On the drive home, I tried to shake it off. It's just work, I told myself. She has to be charming to climb the ladder. But part of me couldn't forget the way Ryan looked at her, or the way she seemed to shine under his attention. As the weeks passed, I tried to convince myself I was overthinking things. Lisa was just under a lot of pressure. Ryan was her boss, and if she seemed close to him, it was probably because she was trying to impress him. That's how corporate life worked, right? But the doubt had taken root, and it was growing. One Friday night, I made dinner, a simple pasta dish, and waited for her to come home. She'd promised she'd be back by 8 p.m., but by 10, there was no sign of her. I called, but it went straight to voicemail. When she finally walked through the door after midnight, she looked startled to see me waiting. "Still up?" she said, setting her bag down and avoiding my eyes. I asked her where she'd been. She told me Ryan had called an impromptu meeting to go over campaign details, and she couldn't leave. Her voice was calm, rehearsed even, but something about the way she said it felt off. "Why didn't you call me back?" I asked. "My phone died," she replied a little too quickly. She walked past me, saying she was exhausted and needed a shower. I watched her go, feeling a knot tighten in my chest. Something wasn't right. The next day, I found the first real crack in her story. Lisa had left her phone charging in the kitchen while she showered, and a message popped up on the screen. I wasn't the kind of person to snoop, but my curiosity got the better of me. The text was from Ryan. "Last night was amazing. You always know how to make things exciting." My heart sank. I didn't touch her phone. I didn't need to. I'd seen enough. I sat there, staring at it, replaying the last few months in my head. The late nights, the secretive smiles, the excuses. The thought of confronting her made me feel sick. But I also knew I couldn't pretend everything was fine. Not anymore. That night, I couldn't sit still. Every time Lisa spoke, her voice grated against the storm of thoughts in my head. The message I'd seen on her phone played on a loop, Ryan's words echoing in my mind. I waited until she'd finished dinner and was scrolling through her phone on the couch, completely unaware of the volcano about to erupt. "Lisa," I started, keeping my tone steady. "We need to talk." She glanced up, her expression immediately shifting. She must have noticed the seriousness in my voice because she put her phone down. "What's wrong?" I told her I'd noticed some changes. The late nights, the distance, the text from Ryan. Her face froze when I mentioned the text, her hand instinctively twitching toward her phone as if to check it. "You went through my phone?" she asked, her voice sharp, defensive. I didn't flinch. It was sitting there. I didn't go looking for anything, Lisa. But that message? What's going on? Her response came fast, like she'd been rehearsing. "Ryan and I are just friends. He jokes around, he's like that with everyone. You're reading too much into it." But the cracks in her composure were obvious. Her voice wavered just enough to betray her, and the way she avoided my eyes told me everything I needed to know. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice firmer now. "I need the truth, Lisa." She exhaled sharply, rubbing her temples as though I was the one causing her stress. "It's nothing, okay? We went out for drinks after work a few times, and he's overly familiar. That's all." I stared at her, my chest tightening. "That's not all, Lisa. I saw the way you two were at the gala. I've seen the way you light up when you talk about him. Just tell me the truth." For a moment, she just sat there, her mouth opening and closing like she was grasping for an excuse. Then she stood up muttering, "I can't deal with this right now," and walked out of the room. She didn't deny it. She didn't try to fix it. She just left. I sat there, numb. Part of me wanted to chase after her, to demand an explanation. But another part of me knew I already had the answer. Lisa slept in the guest room that night, a first for us. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts spinning out of control. I kept replaying the confrontation, dissecting every word, every movement. Her refusal to deny it, her retreat instead of a defense. It all pointed to one conclusion. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She made coffee, asked if I wanted eggs, and avoided looking directly at me. Her calmness made me feel like I was losing my mind. "Are we just going to pretend last night didn't happen?" I asked, breaking the silence. She paused, the coffee pot in her hand, then sighed. "I told you there's nothing going on, Alex. You're blowing this out of proportion." I wanted to scream. Instead, I forced myself to stay calm. "If there's nothing going on, show me your messages with Ryan. Prove it to me." She bristled, her shoulders stiffening. "I don't have to prove anything. If you don't trust me, that's your problem, not mine." That was the moment something shifted inside me. I realized she wasn't going to admit anything. She wasn't going to fight for us. That day marked the beginning of a spiral. Lisa's late nights continued, her excuses piling up, each one flimsier than the last. I tried to hold on, to salvage some semblance of the life we'd built together, but the doubt was corrosive. It ate away at me until every look, every word, felt like a lie. The evidence piles up. I started paying attention to the details. She'd come home wearing the same clothes, but they were slightly disheveled. Her blouse untucked, her hair messier than it had been that morning. Once, I found a receipt in her purse for a hotel bar I knew she hadn't gone to with me. When I asked her about it, she laughed it off. "Oh, that's from an after-work event," she said, brushing it aside like it was nothing. But the pieces were starting to fit together. One night, she came home and went straight to the shower. Her phone, which she usually kept glued to her side, was left on the counter. I don't know what came over me, but I picked it up. The messages with Ryan were gone. She'd deleted them. That was all the confirmation I needed. The night everything came crashing down started like so many others. Lisa had texted me at 7:30, claiming she'd be late because of another last-minute meeting with Ryan. My responses had become automatic. "Okay, be safe." But this time something inside me snapped. Couldn't sit and wait anymore. I needed the truth. After she left for work that morning, I'd noticed a hotel keycard in her purse. No explanation, no reason for her to have it. She'd shrugged it off when I asked, claiming it was from a work event she'd forgotten to return. But now, as I sat alone in our quiet house, I couldn't stop thinking about that card. At 8:15, I grabbed my keys and drove to the hotel Lisa's firm used for events. My heart was racing, my mind a mess of fear and anger. I didn't even have a plan, just a burning need to know. When I arrived, I parked near the side entrance and waited. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I kept my eyes on the lobby. At 9 o'clock, I saw them. Lisa and Ryan walked in together, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. She was dressed in the same work clothes she'd left in that morning, but her hand grazed his arm in a way that made my stomach churn. They disappeared into the elevator. My chest tightened. I wanted to turn away, to drive home and pretend I hadn't seen it. But instead, I followed. I found their room easily. It was the same floor number as the keycard I'd found in her purse. I stood outside for what felt like an eternity, my fists clenched, my mind racing. Finally, I knocked. The door opened slightly, and there she was, her expression instantly shifting from shock to panic. "Alex, what are you doing here?" she stammered, stepping into the doorway as if to block my view. I didn't answer. I just stared at her, at the guilt written all over her face. Then I pushed past her. Ryan was inside, his tie loosened, his jacket draped over a chair. He froze when he saw me, his eyes darting to Lisa. "This isn't what it looks like," he said, his voice unconvincing. I laughed. A hollow, bitter sound I barely recognized. "Of course it's not. That's exactly what guilty people say, isn't it? Lisa tried to grab my arm, pleading, Alex, let me explain. But I wasn't interested in explanations. I've seen enough, I said, my voice cold. You've made your choices, Lisa. Now it's my turn. I left the hotel without another word. Lisa followed me into the hallway, begging me to stop, but I couldn't even look at her. My hands were shaking as I got into my car and drove away, her voice fading into the distance. When I got home, the silence was deafening. I collapsed onto the couch, staring blankly at the wall. The anger had been replaced by a strange numbness, like my mind was trying to protect me from the full weight of what I'd just seen. A part of me expected Lisa to come home right away to try and fix things, to at least pretend to care about what she'd done. But she didn't. Hours passed, and the house remained as quiet as a tomb. That silence told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't ready to face the consequences. The next morning, she walked in as if nothing had happened. Her hair was freshly washed, and she wore the same neutral expression she used whenever she was preparing for a difficult conversation. Alex, she began, her voice measured. I'm sorry about last night, but you have to understand. Stop, I said, cutting her off. I don't want to hear it. She looked stunned, like she'd expected me to crumble, to beg her for an explanation. Instead, I got up, walked to the bedroom, and began packing a bag. What are you doing? She asked, panic creeping into her voice. I'm leaving, I said flatly. At least for now. I need space. Alex, please, let's talk about this, she pleaded, following me. It didn't mean anything. It was a mistake. A mistake. I spun around, finally letting the anger spill out. You don't accidentally book a hotel room with your boss, Lisa. You don't accidentally betray the person who trusted you more than anyone else. She opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't wait to hear it. I grabbed my bag and walked out the door, leaving her standing there, tears in her eyes. The next few days were a blur. I stayed at a hotel on the other side of town, trying to process what had happened. Every time I thought about Lisa and Ryan, my stomach twisted. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to hurt them the way they'd hurt me. But instead, I did something better. I called a lawyer. I explained everything, from the late nights to the hotel confrontation. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Amanda, listened carefully before laying out my options. If you want to protect yourself, you need to act quickly, she said. Start separating your finances. Gather any evidence you have. And whatever you do, don't let her manipulate you into staying. Her advice was a lifeline. It gave me a sense of control, a direction to focus my energy. Lisa tried to call me, of course. Texts, voicemails, emails, all filled with apologies and excuses. But I ignored them. I needed time to think, to plan my next move. I spent the next week putting Amanda's advice into action. Every financial tie Lisa and I shared was carefully unraveled. I moved my savings into a separate account, canceled our joint credit cards, and began documenting everything. Texts, emails, even her excuses from the last few months. Lisa was still in denial. Every message she sent me followed the same pattern. Apologies laced with justifications. It wasn't serious, one text read. It was just a stupid mistake. You're overreacting. But nothing she said changed the facts, and the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. By the end of the week, I wasn't just angry, I was determined. If Lisa thought she could humiliate me and walk away unscathed, she was wrong. One night, I drove back to the house when I knew she wouldn't be home. Using a spare key I'd kept, I let myself in and went straight to her office. Her laptop was there as I'd expected. I wasn't tech-savvy enough to hack into her email myself, but I didn't need to. Lisa's password was written on a sticky note, tucked under her desk calendar. It was almost laughable, how someone who had been so calculated in her deceit could make such a rookie mistake. Inside her email, I found everything I needed. Messages between her and Ryan, some of them mundane, others explicit. Receipts for hotel stays and expensive dinners she hadn't mentioned to me. The final blow was an itinerary for a trip they'd planned together. A weekend getaway under the guise of a work retreat. I took screenshots of everything, saved them to a flash drive, and left the laptop exactly as I'd found it. Then I locked the door and left, feeling the kind of calm that only comes when you know you're holding all the cards. It wasn't just Lisa I wanted to confront. It was Ryan, too. He wasn't just her boss. He was a married man with 2 kids, and I figured his wife deserved to know the truth. After some digging online, I found her social media profile and sent her an anonymous message with screenshots of the emails and pictures of the receipts. I didn't include any commentary, just the facts. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. 2 days later, I got a text from Lisa. "What the hell did you do?" Apparently, Ryan's wife had confronted him, and things had escalated quickly. Word got back to Ryan's company, and he was placed under investigation for misconduct. I hadn't anticipated that twist, but I wasn't going to complain. The fallout was swift and brutal. Ryan was suspended within a week, pending a formal review. Apparently, his wife hadn't just confronted him. She'd gone straight to the company's HR department with every piece of evidence I'd sent her. Between the emails and the receipts, it was impossible for Ryan to spin the situation. Lisa, on the other hand, tried to play damage control. She called me repeatedly, alternating between tearful apologies and angry accusations. "You're ruining my life, Alex," she screamed in one voicemail. "You didn't have to involve his wife." But I wasn't interested in her excuses. This wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about accountability. She'd made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. By the end of the month, Ryan had been fired for violating company policies, and Lisa's reputation at work was in tatters. She tried to keep her job, but her colleagues knew too much. Whispers about her affair spread like wildfire, and soon she resigned under the weight of the shame. Lisa showed up at my temporary apartment one evening, uninvited. I was surprised to see her. She looked nothing like the confident woman I'd married. Her hair was unkempt, her makeup smudged, and her eyes puffy from crying. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling. I let her in, mostly because I wanted to hear what she had to say. She sat on the couch, wringing her hands, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. "I made a mistake," she said quietly. "I let things get out of control with Ryan, and I should have stopped it. But I didn't mean to hurt you, Alex. I was just lost." I folded my arms, leaning against the wall. "You were lost for months, Lisa. You didn't just make a mistake, you made a choice. Over and over again." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she begged me to reconsider. "We can fix this. Please. I'll do whatever it takes. I just want us back." I shook my head, my voice firm. "There's no us anymore. You broke that the moment you lied to me. And honestly, I think you're only here because everything else has fallen apart." Her silence confirmed what I already knew. She left that night, her shoulders slumped in defeat. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of peace. After Lisa walked out of my apartment that night, I didn't hear from her again for weeks. It was as if she'd finally accepted that there was no salvaging what she'd destroyed. I wasn't bitter anymore, I was just done. I finalized the divorce paperwork and sent it to Amanda, my lawyer. Every step of the process felt like another weight lifted off my shoulders. I made sure to keep everything fair but firm. Lisa wouldn't walk away with a single cent more than she was entitled to, and I'd ensured that my assets were protected before the process even began. In the meantime, I threw myself into work. The nights I used to spend agonizing over her lies were now spent building something new. Me. I started going to the gym again, reconnected with old friends, and even began looking into a business idea I'd shelved years ago. I thought about Lisa from time to time, but not in the way I once did. The love I'd felt for her had been replaced by a strange mix of pity and indifference. She'd made her bed, and now she was lying in it. One day, about 2 months after our separation, I ran into a mutual acquaintance at a networking event. We hadn't kept in touch much since college, but he knew both me and Lisa. "Hey, Alex," he said, a little too casually. "I heard about you and Lisa. That sucks, man." I shrugged, not wanting to dwell on it. "Yeah, well, life happens." He hesitated for a moment before adding, "Did you know she's back at her parents' place? I guess things didn't pan out with her boss after all." I nodded, hiding my reaction. Of course, Ryan had moved on. A guy like him wasn't going to stick around after Lisa's career, and his had gone up in flames. It was almost poetic. The woman who had once thrived on attention, success, and admiration was now back where she started, trying to rebuild her life from scratch. Months after the divorce was finalized, my life had taken on a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. I'd moved to a new apartment, launched my side business, and started seeing someone new, Jess, a friend of a friend. Things with her were easy, uncomplicated, and exactly what I needed to heal. I thought I was finally free of Lisa and the chaos she brought into my life. But then came the letter. It arrived on a Friday afternoon, tucked in with the usual junk mail. The envelope was plain, no return address, but the handwriting was familiar. I almost didn't open it, thinking it was one last attempt from Lisa to plead her case. But curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single sheet of paper with just a few lines written on it. "Alex, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but you need to know the full truth. There's more to this story than you think. Check the USB in the envelope. Please." I stared at the letter for a long time, debating whether to just throw it away. But eventually, I reached for the small USB drive tucked into the envelope. Against my better judgment, I plugged it into my laptop. The first thing I saw was a folder labeled Ryan. Inside were dozens of screenshots, emails, text messages, and even scanned documents. As I clicked through them, the picture became clearer. Ryan wasn't just some sleazy boss who'd manipulated Lisa. He was a full-blown con artist. The messages revealed that Ryan had been using Lisa, not just for an affair, but as a pawn in a larger scheme. He'd convinced her to help him embezzle money from the company under the guise of creative marketing expenses. Lisa had signed off on everything, completely unaware that she was being set up as the fall person. I sat there stunned. The last file in the folder was a video, a recording of Lisa confronting Ryan after he'd been fired. In the video, her voice trembled with anger and panic. "You told me this was all above board," she shouted. "You promised it was for the campaign." Ryan smirked, leaning back in his chair. "And you believed me. That's on you, Lisa. Good luck explaining it to the authorities." My stomach dropped. If the authorities ever came after Lisa, and she decided to drag me into this mess. No, couldn't risk it. I reached out to Amanda, my lawyer, forwarding her the files and explaining what I'd discovered. She was quick to act, filing a protective order and ensuring that I was legally distanced from anything involving Lisa and Ryan's financial misdeeds. But the bombshell came a week later. Amanda called me, her voice uncharacteristically tense. "Alex," she said, "there's one more thing you should know. Lisa's not the only one Ryan targeted. He's been running this scheme for years, and you're connected to it through a financial account you didn't know about." My heart sank. "What do you mean?" "Lisa opened a joint account under both of your names, likely forged your signature, and funneled some of the stolen funds into it. It looks like Ryan convinced her to do it to cover their tracks. You need to prepare for an investigation." I was furious. Lisa hadn't just cheated on me. She'd put my entire future at risk. I debated ignoring it all, but my anger drove me to call her. To my surprise, she agreed to meet. When we sat down, Lisa looked like a shadow of her former self. She was pale, her eyes tired, and her confidence shattered. "Why did you send me the USB?" I demanded, skipping any pleasantries. "Was it guilt? Or were you just trying to drag me down with you?" She shook her head, tears welling up. "I didn't know what Ryan was doing until it was too late. I sent you the USB because you deserve to know the truth. He used me, Alex, and now the feds are after me. I'm trying to make it right, But I didn't want you to get blindsided. Her words didn't move me. You forged my name on that account. Did you think about what that could do to me? She broke down, sobbing. I was stupid, Alex. I was desperate. I thought he cared about me. I thought I was helping him, helping us. I didn't think. Exactly. I cut in. You didn't think. And now I'm cleaning up your mess. Lisa's tears didn't move me. I'd spent too much time cleaning up the wreckage she left behind. I sat there, staring at her, my anger tempered by a strange sense of pity. She wasn't the same person I'd married, or maybe she was, and I'd been blind to it all along. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady. I've already spoken to my lawyer. I've submitted proof that I had nothing to do with that account or anything else Ryan pulled you into. You're on your own, Lisa. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Alex, please. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I don't know what to do. That's not my problem anymore, I replied. You made your choices, Lisa, and now you have to live with them. I stood up to leave, but before I walked out, I turned back to her one last time. If the authorities contact me, I'll cooperate fully. Don't drag me any further into this, or you'll regret it. Her sobs followed me out the door, but I didn't look back. Over the next few weeks, Amanda worked tirelessly to ensure my name was cleared. With the evidence I'd provided from the USB and my financial records, it was easy to prove I hadn't been involved in Ryan and Lisa's scheme. The authorities eventually caught up with Ryan in another state. He'd been running similar scams for years, and his web of deceit had finally unraveled. Lisa wasn't so lucky. She was charged as an accomplice, and although her lawyers tried to paint her as a victim, the evidence was damning. I didn't follow the trial too closely. I was too busy rebuilding my life. But I heard through mutual acquaintances that Lisa had received a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperating with the investigation. By the time the dust settled, my life was unrecognizable, and for the better. The chaos Lisa had brought into my world had forced me to take control of my future in a way I never had before. Jess and I grew closer, and for the first time in years, I felt what it was like to be in a relationship built on trust. She knew about my past, of course, but she didn't pity me. If anything, she admired how I'd come out stronger on the other side. One evening, months after everything had ended, I received an email from Lisa. It was short, just a few lines. I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't blame you. But I'm truly sorry for everything I put you through. You didn't deserve any of it. I hope one day, you find the happiness I couldn't give you. I didn't respond. What could I say? Her apology felt genuine, but it didn't change the past. Years later, as I sit here writing this, I can honestly say I've moved on. Lisa is a chapter in my life I've closed for good. I've built something new, something better, and I no longer carry the anger or bitterness I once felt. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that betrayal doesn't define you. How you rise from it does. I never thought I'd be the guy telling a story like this. And yet, here I am, proof that even the most broken pieces can be put back together.